Okay, so it's great to be here. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's QuickSight Learning Series session, where we'll be covering about resource permissions in QuickSight and also showing some labs where we can actually do this for real. So you can certainly follow along and watch this session later on as well to just get some tips on how to deploy this, not just using the QuickSight console, but using the QuickSight CLI as well. So I see we've got a good number of attendees now, so let's kick it off. So my name is Andrew Bacon, so I'm a QuickSight Solutions Architect. I'm based out of the UK. And today, as with all these sessions, what we'll be doing is recording these as well as taking questions in the QuickSight community. So the QuickSight community is sort of one-stop shop for learning and for all resources. So there's a lot of signposting to the different resources that we have within QuickSight and within the QuickSight community. So you can see on the page now that you can get to some of our demos. So we have Demo Central, we have workshops that are publicly available, we have a developer portal, documentation too. So if I just bring that up as well myself, so this is what the community currently looks like. So today we'll be taking questions in the question and answer section. So if you haven't already registered with the community, please do, and it'll be in here that you'll be able to ask questions today. I'll just quickly show you how to do that as well. So if you're logged into the community, you go to the question and answer section under categories, which will bring you to this page where you can see all the questions that are being asked currently by the community. And then if you click on new question, then you'll be able to come in here, give a title to your question, type your question underneath. And the key thing today, so that my colleague Kushik, who's supporting today's session, can identify these easily within the community, is if you type in here the tag QLS-RP, make sure that's populated. So when you ask your question and you click the plus new question button at the bottom here to submit it, that the question will be easily identified, and we can make sure that we respond to these during the session and following up as well after the session too. So that's how you'll ask questions today. If we just skip back to the slides we have. Yep, this is a continuation of the learning series that I'm sure you've already attended many of these before. There's also a number of other things that you can do on the community, so you can check out what's new, see what features are being released. You can see what blogs are also being published and what events like this one there are in the community. You can also get recognized as an expert, so you yourself can build yourself a profile and get seen and recognized as somebody in the community who has expertise and is able to answer questions. There's also a great searchable history of content on there, so whether it's articles or whether it's questions that have been asked in the past, please go and check it out. The community is a great place to look for any content and get answers to your questions on QuickSight. I'll just leave the link up on screen again, just in case you didn't get it. There's a QR code as well that will take you to the community. Just reiterating as well, that's the tag you'll need to select when asking questions today, so QLS-RP. And as I said, today's session, as with all these learning series sessions, will be recorded and it will be shared at a later date. It'll also be rerun, this one in Pacific time next Wednesday. So also check it out then if you'd rather watch it then. Okay, so what's today's session about? Well, we're going to give just an overview of QuickSight permissions, to how to configure those permissions, what the different options for them are, and covering the resources available that will help you get started with doing this, as well as being able to rewatch this video and see how to do it as well. So let's jump into it. So what are permissions in QuickSight? So QuickSight permissions control the following. So whenever you deploy resources to QuickSight, so whether that's building analyses, creating dashboards, creating themes, creating data sets, then you can control with permissions the resources that your users within QuickSight have access to. And at the same time, not just what the resources are, but what actions can be performed on those resources, and also what actions can be performed within QuickSight. So that can be that you are creating, deleting, updating, describing, listing, or searching for these assets within QuickSight. Some of your users as well, so your administrative users, will also want to have permissions to manage your subscriptions. So that's the different, say, pricing models and billing options that you signed up to within QuickSight, the account settings, and also users and groups themselves within the QuickSight. There's different actions as well. So one of the links we've got at the end for you will explain all the available actions there are. Or if you're interested in embedded use cases as well, you can also make sure that users have actions or not on being able to generate embedded URLs for embedding QuickSight dashboards into your applications. So how can you go about applying QuickSight permissions? So there's a number of methods for this. The first one, and that's the one that you'll need to apply when you create any user within QuickSight, is choose from one of the built-in roles, which we'll cover next. You can also create what are known as custom permission profiles and apply those as well to users. There are specific resource permissions as well. So as I briefly touched on already, so if you have a dashboard, who is that dashboard shared with and what can that user do with that dashboard? And you can also use policies, so policies within AWS, within the IAM service, and assign those to users as well. So we're going to touch on each of these today, and I'll also bring it to life by showing you how this is done within the portal. And using the CLI. So if we come back to the QuickSight roles that are built in, there are three, and I'm sure if you're familiar with QuickSight already, then these will be familiar to you. So admin role, that will allow you to have your users be able to author and perform administrative tasks like managing users. So they can create dashboards, they can create data sets, but they can also manage users and perform administrative tasks. So if you wanted to say group users into different groups or even set which of these roles those users can have, then your admin users can do that. The next built-in role is the author. So authors can they can author the analyses, they can create the data sets and dashboards required in QuickSight, but they can't perform any of the administrative tasks that the admin role can. And finally, the readers. So they are permitted to interact with the shared dashboards. but they're not able to author. So they can't create analyses, they can't publish the dashboards or perform any of the administrative tasks. So from a reader perspective, those users are really just consuming the dashboards that the authors or admin users would have published and made available to them. So if I just hop into the QuickSight console now, so if you're not familiar with this, then this is the page you'll be greeted with. So at the moment, I'm my top level admin user within QuickSight, and if I click on the little user icon in the top right corner here and go to the Manage QuickSight option, that'll take me to the administrative part of the console. And by default, it lands you on the Manage Users page. So within here, I've got a number of users already created. I've got a second admin user here who's been given the role of admin. I've got an author user here, so I've granted them the role of author, and I've got one reader user as well. And today I'll be jumping around. I'll always try and call out which user experience you're seeing when I do move between the users. So I'll try not to go too quickly on that front. But yeah, from a basic level, what we have here are one user for each different type, plus we've got a second admin user as well. So this is where the built-in roles are applied. You can also apply them at the point at which the users get created as well, but these have all been pre-created for you. So moving beyond just those built-in roles, there's also the concept in QuickSight of custom permission profiles. So these can be created in the QuickSight console, if you're using the Enterprise Edition, that is. So these are applied ultimately using IAM policies, so the AWS IAM service underneath, and therefore they will override any permissions that have been granted by the built-in roles. Also, these can be customized to restrict users from performing a multitude of actions. So I will just list them on screen now. But currently within the portal, within the QuickSight console, you can create permissions profiles that cover these permissions. Now, when you create a permission profile, actually what you're saying the profile will do is restrict the following actions and capabilities for a particular user. So if I move back to the portal, we can see where this is controlled. So as my top level admin user here, I'm back in my manage users session. If I click on the manage permissions button at the top here, you can see that currently I have no customer permissions defined, but if I click on create, I'll be able to create a new customer permissions profile. So for today, I will call mine dashboard developer. And what I'm going to do is probably not a completely normal use case, but I'll refer to this dashboard developer as someone who can create dashboards and analyses, but I'm going to not allow them to create their own data sets or data sources. So perhaps if you wanted to create segregation between your users, maybe you wanted to have a separate user who would be in charge of creating your data sets and controlling which data sources are added to QuickSight, then this would be one way of saying, okay, your dashboard developers will only have abilities to create those analyses and share those dashboards. So I'm going to restrict the dashboard developer from creating or updating any data sets. I'll also...
Just sorry to interrupt. Is it possible to zoom in slightly?
Yes, sure. Thanks, Kushik.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Hopefully that's better to see. So yeah, so what I'm going to do here is create a profile that when applied will restrict the user from being able to create datasets or update them or create or update data sources. So if I click on create down at the bottom here, we'll see now that under the list of custom permissions, we've got a dashboard developer custom permission and a brief summary of the restrictions that are applied to that particular custom permission profile. So as it stands, this can't be applied within the portal. So what we're going to do now is jump to Cloud9. So this is an SDK, so a software development environment that we have in AWS. And to apply that custom permission, what I will do is bring in the command. I'll just walk you through that as well. So pasted this in. Hopefully that's a good resolution. You can see that. So we've got the CLI command here. So this is the AWS QuickSight command line interface. So what we're going to do is call AWS QuickSight the update user command, passing in the account ID, passing in the namespace. So in this demonstration, all the assets are going to be created in what is known as the default namespace. I'm going to target as well in this instance my author user. So put in the email and the username of my author user, as well as their role. And the final thing here to apply the custom permission profile is to define using the custom permissions name and set that to dashboard developer. So if I now, in fact, before I do that, what I will show you is that currently you just hop to the author. So I'll now switch to the author profile. So you can see up here now, I'm actually logged in a different session here as the author user that I created. And as it stands, this author, if I refresh the screen just to show that nothing's been applied yet, so this author has the ability to create new data sets. So they can do that from existing data sources or new data sources. So as it stands, this user has that capability to create data sets and data sources. So if I go back, what we'll do is now issue the CLI command to assign the custom permissions profile. So that's come back successfully. We've got a status 200, so it's been successfully executed. And there's two ways we can verify this. So if we go back to our author, sorry, if we go back to our top level admin user, and we've refreshed this page, you can now see that the dashboard developer permission has been assigned to the author user over here. And then if we go and take a look at the author user themselves and we refresh this page, what you'll notice is that we did have a button up here in the top right corner to add new data sets. So you can see that the permissions profile has immediately been applied. So there's no longer the capability for this author to create new data sets. So this might beg the question, if you want to unapply that custom permission, we can do that as well. So if we flip back to our Cloud9 console, and we issue a very similar command, but this time instead of providing the custom permissions name, we'll provide the option to unapply custom permissions. So same account, same user. And that's come back with a status 200, so we know that the command was executed successfully. So if we come back to our top level admin and we refresh this, we can see that under permissions, the dashboard developer permission profile has been removed. And if we hop back to our author user here, and we refresh the page, you can see that the new dataset button has reappeared. So they've got the capability back in order to create new datasets and new data sources. So that's a quick example of how you can use custom permission profiles to constrict what your users can do or restrict what users can do. There's also resource permissions. So moving on from what you can do with custom permission profiles, resource permissions can be assigned directly to resources. So there are a set of CLI and API calls. So again, we'll be bringing this to life by using the CLI here. But there are a number of different calls that you can apply. So you can update the analyses, dashboards, datasets, data source, folder, template, and theme permissions using these calls. And what we'll do in the next example to bring this to life is that as the administrator, we will create a data set. At that point, the data set will be available to the administrator, but nobody else will be able to use it at that point. So we'll apply permissions to the data set so that then the author user can use that data set. As the author then, we'll quickly create an analysis and publish that as a dashboard. But again, once that dashboard's been published, it's not shared with anyone at that point. So we'll use the CLI to apply permissions to then the dashboard so that the reader can view the dashboard. So let me bring up the admin user. So I'm back as my admin level user. So I've zoomed in a bit here, so hopefully it will display correctly. But if I go to the main page, so I've clicked on QuickSight here in the top left corner. And I'm going to create a data set. So I'll go to new data set. I'm just going to use our standard SaaS sales data set that I'm sure you'll have come across if you've been following our workshops and demonstrations in the past. In fact, I selected the wrong file there. Let me try that again. So I'm going to upload a file. Okay, that's the one I wanted. So I'm not going to do anything special with this data set. I'm going to take it as it is. So we'll just save and publish it. And then if we hop back, so I've got my list of data sets here. We've got some that are just the built-in data sets, but my SaaS sales data set is at the top here. And if I switch to, say, the author user that we have, and just refresh their view, you'll see that as it stands, that author cannot see this particular data set yet. So to enable that, what we're going to need to do is we hop back into our Cloud9 portal. I will show you the permissions file. So this is the resource permissions file defined in JSON. This is a fairly simple example. What this is going to do is for a given data set, so we'll need to update this data set ID with the data set that we just created. We're going to grant permissions, so we're going to allow whichever user's in here the following actions. So the user is defined as this principal entry here, so I'm going to allow the author user to have the following actions. So these 5 actions will give that author the required permissions to consume that dataset and use it in their dashboards. So if we hop back to our admin console, we click on the dataset. The dataset ID we can obtain from the URL up here. So if you see this part of the URL, this is the unique dataset ID. So I'm going to copy that. And paste it into here. So I've updated my JSON file that defines the grant permissions with the correct dataset ID. Not going to change the principal or the actions. I know these are the actions we need. And at this point, what you can do is pass in the file. So using the update dataset permissions CLI command, passing in the AWS account ID, and passing in the input JSON file that we just updated, which is demo2 dataset perms.json. So we've executed that. We've got a status 200, so we know that that was successful. And if we now hop to our author user, who we just granted permissions to on that data set, show you here that we are back as the author. I refresh. So we now see that this author has access to that data set. So from here, we'll click on the data set and we're going to build an analysis from it. So I'll just build something very simple. For purposes of today, I'll select, let's say, country and sales. So we're not going to focus on the design of the dashboard today. We just want something that we can share. And what we'll do at this point is we will publish the dashboard. So let's call it QLS RP dashboard. We'll publish it. So now if you look up at the top in the URL, we can see that we've got the dashboard displayed. This part of the URL is the dashboard ID, and we'll need that next when we go in and edit the permissions JSON file to apply permissions for our readers to be able to consume this dashboard. Now you can, and I'm sure if you're familiar with QuickSight, you can see that you can share the dashboard from within the console. But for the purposes of today, we wanted to show again how using the CLI you can achieve the same action and apply the same permissions. So what we'll do is we'll take a copy of the dashboard ID. And if we move back to our Cloud9 console, and this time we're going to update. I've got a template here for the data set permissions. So slightly different format to this file, to the one we just looked at for defining the, oh, sorry, I've gone into the wrong one. Apologies. So going to the dashboard. So we've already applied the dataset permissions. We're now going into the dashboard permissions file. a slightly different format to the one we looked at earlier where we had dataset ID here. So now we've got the dashboard ID. So if I replace dashboard ID with the new dashboard that we just published, again, we've got a grant permissions block here. If you want to revoke permissions, so if you wanted to reverse these changes, then instead of grant permissions, use the revoke permissions command here. Our principal, so that's the user that we want to apply this to, will be our reader user. And underneath, we've got the actions that we need to apply to this user to be able to view and consume this dashboard. So there are 3 actions required in this example. So we will save that JSON file. And just for complete visibility, if I now jump to my reader user, we'll just verify that as it stands, the reader user can't see any dashboards. So I'm the reader up here. If I refresh, there's still no dashboards that are available to them. So the next step is to run the update dashboard permissions command, passing in again that JSON file that we've just edited. So the dashboard permissions file. Here, this is the JSON we were just looking at. So I'm going to run that command. Lots of output here, but the key thing is again that you get the status 200, showing that the command was successfully executed. And now if we hop to our reader user, so just confirming we're the reader here. If we go to refresh our dashboard view, our reader can now see, so they can now list that dashboard. But if you click on it, they can also access it as well. So this reader doesn't have access to the data set. They do have access to the dashboard that is built on top of that data set. This reader also doesn't have access to the analyses that we built and deployed the dashboard from. They simply now just have permissions on the dashboard and being able to view the data. So that's covering off resource permissions. I've really just sort of touched or scraped the surface there of applying those to different assets within QuickSight. But those are the API calls on screen that you'll use to set permissions for all the different assets. There's one final approach to applying permissions within QuickSight that I touched on earlier. So using AWS IAM, you can define policies. So these policies get applied to users. They have a slightly different structure, as we'll see, to those that we've already looked at when building our JSON permissions profiles. But when applied to the user, these roles will again override the permissions granted by the built-in roles. So if I move to our top-level admin console, and I'm going to jump to the Manage QuickSight role here, this is where our second admin comes into play. So the second admin by default, when they're created, they won't have permission to do certain actions. So by default, if I was logged in as the second admin user, this user here, they wouldn't have ability to manage custom permissions. But we can define, using an IAM policy, we can define a policy that we can then apply to that user and allow them to have that capability within QuickSight to also manage custom permissions. So if we now move to the AWS console. This is the Identity and Access Management console, otherwise known as IAM. And within here, I've got my second admin user already added. If I click on the username and just scroll down slightly, let me just zoom in a touch to make this easier to see. So under here, I've done this in advance because these policies can take a little time to apply. So I didn't want to have a big pause in today's demonstration. But what we'll do is at least take a look at what the policy looks like, and we can see that it's already been applied. So from here, you can click on this policy that I've predefined. And within here, you can see now the policies. This is to allow a user to be able to control custom permissions, manage custom permissions. And there's some wildcarding that is applied in here. So for this policy, the statement is to allow. So the alternative would be that you could specify an effect of deny. So you can either allow or deny actions on resources. So the action that we're applying here is actually a wildcarded action. So all of the different custom permissions that can be applied. So to create custom permissions, delete custom permissions will be permitted now for any users that this policy is attached to. And we're doing that for all resources. So we're not restricting it to any particular resource as well. So there'll be some links at the end that you'll be able to dive into, and it will give you a list of all the possible actions that can be defined here, as well as how you apply these to resources. So do please take a look at those at the end. But the effect of this is that my second admin user, so what I will do here is briefly log in as the second admin user. So I'll sign out of my reader. And sign back in as my second admin user. So here I am. I'm in as my admin user at this point, my second admin user. So this user doesn't have permissions on any of the other assets we created today. But if I click on the little user icon in the top right corner and go to manage QuickSight again, to the manage console, normally when you create additional admin users within QuickSight, this manage permissions button wouldn't allow them to come in here and either see or create customer permissions. But because we've added the policy and we've assigned that policy to this user, this admin user also has capacity now to create custom permissions and manage those within QuickSight. Okay, so that concludes really the demonstrations today. There are a number of references here that we'll make available. So you'll get follow-ups to these. All of these links are part of the AWS documentation. So we'll make sure these are available to you. Let me just put these in the chat now if I can. Finally, thank you for attending today. I hope you found that useful. I hope it prompted some questions as well. I'll take a look at the community after the session as well and see what questions have been asked in there. And I'm sure Kushik's been following that too. But any feedback, please follow the link on screen. Again, stay connected, be a part of the community, and let's learn together. Let's help each other. But thank you for joining, and that's the end of today's session. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye now.